Thanks very much. We will try to get in a very quick comment. It looks as though Senator Biden is close to starting this up. Oakland, California, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to make a couple comments. One was about, previous caller talked about that the statute of limitations had run out on any trial that would go on. This is not, in fact, a trial. This is a hearing into a confirmation about a Supreme Court justice. So it's definitely not a trial. The other thing is I'm sort of disappointed in a lot of the callers that are calling in concern with their understanding of sexual harassment and the belief that people should just come forward, women should just come forward immediately. This occurred 10 years ago, and I believe the atmosphere of coming forward about...
Thank you for your comments. We are about to get underway there in the Senate Russell Caucus room. Let's listen in for a second.
I'm trying to get hold of Mitchell.
We will listen to College Park, Maryland until the senator begins. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to make my comment that I think that it's completely political. It's not the issue of sexual harassment, want to sit or who they not want to sit on the Supreme Court. I also feel that it's racist, but so that racism is not proclaimed. They have a black female against a black male. Again, I believe this is all political. I do believe, however, after listening to the testimonies, something did take place. Whether it was sensationalized more so, I think that the leak was intentional. All of this, I think a lot of people should stop and think about. And furthermore, perhaps the members on the committee should be scrutinized, each one of them, for 405 days or longer.
Wildwood, New Jersey.
Okay. After watching the testimonies, I feel that it is sad to think that the United States of America has to watch something of this nature. I also believe that this is something that should have been determined or had brought to the courts long before now.
All right. Thank you, Wildwood, New Jersey. Gaithersburg, Maryland, you're on the air. What are your comments?
I just want to say that I'm a Democrat, and Senator Simon just made a statement a little bit ago that he did not have anything to do with this leaking to the press, as well as none of his staff had anything to do with it.
All right, sir. The senator's gavelled in. We'll let you go. Thanks.
The hearing will come back to order. To explain to the witnesses what we're doing is trying to figure out the remainder of the schedule. I emphasize again that Senator Thurmond and I are under strict time constraints based on placed on us, understandably, by the entirety of the Senate, the leadership in the Senate, and the remainder of the Senate, to resolve this entire matter in time for all of our colleagues to be able to consider all the testimony here and make a judgment. As I've indicated at the outset, were this a trial, which it is not, all of you who are sitting panel members here know that there would be a legitimate reason for this trial to go on for another week or more. We do not have that luxury. The nominee insists on a resolution of it. The White House insists on a resolution of it, and the Senate insists on a resolution of it. So what we're attempting to do is work out not only a time when we're going to vote on this on the Senate floor, which is done 6 o'clock Tuesday night, but an agreement on an absolute end time when these hearings will end. And I assure this panel you will not have to be here till the end. We're about to do that with you all now, and we will probably recess very briefly after this panel is completed to discuss the final witness list and the time frame within which each witness or panel will be coming before the committee. I thank the panel, and I thank everyone in this room for their indulgence and I hope they understand, but based upon the knowledge of the arcane, the processes of the Senate, I'm sure no one will understand. But nonetheless, that's where we are. Now, where were we in questioning? Who is next, Simon? Senator Simon has 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, first, if I may comment on something said by Senator Specter just before my time came up. He said, and I wrote down, there were more than 11 calls, only 11 that were documented. To my knowledge, that is an inaccurate statement. We know...
Mr. Chairman, I said we would produce a witness who would testify to that there were other calls, that 11 were documented when he wasn't there, but we would produce a witness. So if Senator Simon's going to quote me, please be accurate.
Well, if you know that there were more, so far there's been nothing entered into the evidence suggesting that there are more than 11 calls.
Let me ask the senator from Pennsylvania, has the name of that witness been made available to the committee?
Yes, that's Ms. Holt, who's the custodian of the records.
Ms. Holt, all right,
and
fine.
also the secretary who was prepared to testify that there were many more calls made by Professor Hill which got through to Judge Thomas, so there was not a notation. That,
but it's Ms. Holt we're talking about.
That's right.
Thank you.
And
right.
Let me just add that one or more of those calls were made with great reluctance. We have evidence on that also. Now, getting to the panel, we will get to you here. Judge Hoerchner, you said in your deposition, you were asked, did you see her press conference on television? Answer, yes, I did. Question, did you find her to be credible? Answer, I saw most of it. Absolutely. If you knew Anita, you couldn't doubt her word on anything. I've never known her even to exaggerate. As you can tell from what you've seen of her on television and in person, her style is understatement in everything she does. Now, yesterday, it was suggested by one of the members of the Senate that the fact that she did not document what was happening to her questions her credibility. I would be interested in any reflections you might have, all four witnesses, on whether or not, on the matter of documentation in that kind of a situation. And does the fact that she did not document this in any way diminish her credibility in your mind? Judge, if we can call on you first.
Absence of documentation could never diminish Anita's credibility to those of us who have known her since 1977 and 1978. Documentation is usually, in my experience, something that someone would do who is contemplating a lawsuit. It was always my impression that Anita had no intention to sue then Mr. Thomas, and that she has had no agenda vis-a-vis Judge Thomas.
Ms. Wells?
The lack of documentation does not trouble me, Senator, because I think, as I tried to indicate to Senator Specter earlier, I don't see what a record would have accomplished. She knew what was done to her. And furthermore, to put it down on paper to say he said X to me on Thursday would have been no more evidence for us today than anything else.
And of course, she didn't anticipate anything.
No, so
like
there was
this.
no reason. As the judge said, she wasn't thinking of bringing a suit.
And if I could relate it, it says to me that she didn't intend to prosecute or carry on in that way. You've mentioned your own experience. Did you document that in any way, writing it down in a diary or anything?
No, I did not. It's just something that will always be with me. And so I have no need to write it down. I would like to forget it, and I cannot. So I would not want it to be anywhere where it could be picked up and read by anyone.
Mr. Carr?
I would echo that, I guess, but in addition, my recollection of discussing these things with Anita Hill is that they were very painful for her. And I think she did not want to certainly talk about them with me, and she may well have wanted to forget them, and that writing them down may, in fact, in and of itself, been additionally painful for her.
Mr. Paul?
Senator, I would have to say, as a lawyer, that the absence of documentation is completely consistent with my recollection of her reluctance in wanting to discuss it, and her statement that she felt she had no recourse.
If I may ask one more question, Mr. Chairman. Please. Each of you has explained why you are here. Why do you think Anita Hill came forward and testified? Judge?
She has said that she came forward out of the sense of her obligation as a citizen. I think the incidents that occurred those many years ago have raised a serious question of character in someone who has been nominated for one of the most important positions in the country. I know that she was very reluctant to come forward, but I think she felt she had a duty to her country.
Ms. Wells?
Well, I can only echo what the judge has said. Anita, Professor Hill, is a very loyal person, and therefore she's loyal to what she believes she ought to do. And so therefore she has come forward only because she felt that that was the right thing to do.
Senator, I can really only, I guess, speculate on why she has come forward. I would think my recollections of her personality are that while she would like to come forward in this manner, she would be terrified of the invasion of privacy, and she would have been extremely hesitant. But at the same time, I have the recollection that she is a forthright person, and when asked a question, she feels compelled to give a honest answer. And I would think here that she has somehow found herself on this sort of proverbial slippery slope, that she has felt obligated to make some statement when asked, and that has snowballed totally out of her control to the point where she had no alternative but to come forward in a total and fulsome way.
And if I could ask you, and then I want to hear from Mr. Paul, she is both a lawyer and a law professor. I assume she has a very elevated feeling, as we all do, for the Supreme Court. Do you think this was a factor in coming forward also?
It may well have been that when she looked at the price she would have to pay to do this, that because it was the Supreme Court, she viewed it as of such great importance that she was willing to pay that price.
Mr. Paul?
Of course, I haven't discussed with Professor Hill, Senator, her reasons for coming forward, but I would imagine that if I were in her situation, when asked the question by an agent of the FBI, I would feel compelled to answer the question honestly as a servant of the court. I cannot imagine anything that Professor Hill could think to gain as a legal academician by coming forward. I think her career has frankly probably suffered as a result of her coming forward. I think that she had a very bright career. I think that if someone had asked me a few weeks ago, I would say that I could imagine Professor Hill coming before this committee in a very different capacity as a judicial nominee herself. I think her opportunities for that now have been destroyed. I think she paid a big price for her conscience.
I thank you, and I thank all four of you for coming forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Thurmond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today.
Wait, I think it goes, Senator Thurmond, Senator Khol is recognized now.
I'd like to ask you this question. From your testimony, it appears that none of you four witnesses have any personal knowledge of the charges made by Professor Hill against Judge Thomas, and that all you know about the matter is what Professor Hill told you. Is that correct?
I was not a precipiate witness, Senator.
What is that?
I was not a precipiate witness. I said, that is correct.
Miss Wells? Miss Wells?
That is correct, Senator.
Mr. Carr?
It's correct. I was not in the room.
Mr. Paul?
That is true, Senator.
That's all. Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time to the Specter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When my time last expired, Judge Hoerchner, I was asking you to refer to page 5 of your prior testimony before the staff and a question where you said that, quote, line 6 on page 5, quote, I did run into her very briefly at a professional conference in 1984, late December. And my question to you is, did you at that time ask Professor Hill anything about these alleged statements made by Judge Thomas?
I do not remember asking her that.
Judge Hoerchner, can you be any more specific than you have been about where you were at the time this conversation occurred, where you say Professor Hill made these statements about Judge Thomas's comments? We've been trying to fix the date, and it would be helpful if you were able to at least say where you lived at that time in an effort to try to pin that down. Can you help us on that?
Unfortunately, as I've explained to the FBI and here, I really cannot pin the date down. The one thing that I can be absolutely certain about is the fact that she was working for Clarence Thomas at the time, because she stated that she was experiencing sexual harassment from her boss, Clarence.
Can you at least tell us whether you were living in Washington at the time you had that conversation with her?
I cannot pin down the date with any further specificity.
Judge Hoerchner, shifting over to the contacts you had with other people at or about the time you called Professor Hill on the day of Judge Thomas's nomination for the Supreme Court, had you received a call from anyone prior to the time you called Professor Hill asking her what she was going to do?
Absolutely not.
When did you have the first call, if any, from any member of the news media?
I'm trying to remember who called whom. The first person from the news media with whom I spoke was Nina Totenberg from National Public Radio, and PBS.
What did she say to you?
And that was after Anita had already spoken to her. She just briefly asked me the same types of things that I'd been asked by the staff member of the chairman.
And what did you respond?
I responded with essentially the same information that I had given in my statement. I also asked her not to use my name.
Judge Hoerchner, you're not in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's statement that Judge Thomas spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films, are you?
I do not have an explicit memory of that.
Judge Hoerchner, are you in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's statement that Judge Thomas talked to her about such matters as women having sex with animals?
I do not have a memory of references to women having sex with animals.
Are you
what
in a
I do have a memory of is her telling me that he said to her, if we had any witnesses, you would have a perfect case against me.
Well, I understand that, and what I'm trying to do now is to go through the real essence or gravamen or testimony which Professor Hill gave against Judge Thomas, to be sure that we understand you, because as I understand it, you do not, but I want to be sure. You said you can't corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her about pornographic films. You can't corroborate Judge Thomas's statement about women having sex, etc., as I just said. Can you corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke about pornographic materials depicting individuals with large sex organs?
No.
Can you corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her graphically about his own sexual prowess?
No.
Can you corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her about the odd episode, or Judge Thomas participated in the odd episode about drinking a Coke with the allegation of the pubic hair?
No.
Ms. Wells, are you in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's testimony that Judge Thomas spoke to her about pornographic films?
No, I am not.
Are you in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her about women having sex, etc., with others than men?
No.
Are you in a position to corroborate that he talked about pornographic materials with large private parts?
No, I am not.
Are you in a position to corroborate that Judge Thomas talked to her about his own sexual prowess?
No, I am not.
Or about the Coke incident?
No, I am not.
And Mr. Carr, are you in a position to corroborate any of that?
Those are all consistent with the things she has told me, but I am not in a position to corroborate them specifically.
And Professor Paul, are you in a position to corroborate that Judge Thomas talked to Professor Hill about pornographic films?
No.
About any of the specifics I've asked Ms. Wells and Judge Hoerchner about?
All of that, Senator, would be consistent with sexual harassment, but she did not talk to me. I don't recall that she talked to me about any of those particulars.
Professor Paul, did you know prior to the time these hearings started that when Professor Hill accompanied Judge Thomas from the Department of Education to EEOC, that as a matter of fact, she had a classification at the Department of Education that she could have stayed there?
No, Senator.
Professor Paul, did you know that prior to the time that this hearing started that Professor Hills had made at least 11 calls which were recorded to Judge Thomas, and others unrecorded?
No, Senator.
Did you know, Professor Paul, that Professor Hill drove Judge Thomas to the airport and was with him alone on that occasion in Oklahoma City or Tulsa?
No, Senator.
Did you know any of that, Mr. Carr?
No.
Did you know any of that, Ms. Wells?
No, Senator.
Did you know any of that, Judge Hoerchner?
I didn't hear her testify about driving him to the airport.
So you didn't know about that?
No, I do not know about that.
Judge Hoerchner, if you had a vote on Judge Thomas, yes or no, what would it be?
Senator, I don't have a vote here.
Ms. Wells, if you had a vote yes or no on Judge Thomas, what would it be?
Senator, the hearings are not over, and you have more witnesses for Anita Hill to hear, and I think then you would have a better understanding of her and why we are here saying that her allegations are true.
Mr. Carr, if you had a vote yes or no on Judge Thomas, what would it be?
Senator, I have not followed the hearings earlier before the Senate decided to delay, so I can't make an informed decision based on that. But I do believe the sexual harassment charges, and I think he would have to be one incredible jurist to get over my view that those are true. So I would vote no.
Would you want to hear the rest of the testimony?
I think if I was in the official position to make that choice, then I would definitely hear the rest of the
Professor Paul, you've already testified that when they came to you, you wouldn't sign a letter.
That's correct, Senator.
Do you have an opinion today? Would you vote yes or no on Judge Thomas?
If these allegations are proved true, Senator, I would say that he is not fit for the Supreme Court.
But you'd want to hear the rest of the evidence?
Yes, Senator.
So that none of you is in a position sitting there today without hearing the rest of the evidence to reject Judge Thomas solely on the basis of what Professor Hill has said.
I am in a position to do that.
I thought you wanted to hear the rest of the evidence, Mr. Carr.
I said that I think it would be incumbent upon me to review all of the evidence, but that I have great difficulty imagining that he could be such a great jurist as to justify being confirmed in light of my belief that there was sexual harassment.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Khol.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on what Senator Specter has been asking you, you are in a position, do I understand it, on the basis of your testimony today, to state as a matter of fact that Professor Hill informed you in a way that satisfied you that she was being sexually harassed by Judge Thomas, by Clarence Thomas. Is any question in your mind about the clarity of the information that she provided to you, the sense that she provided to you, Judge Hoerchner?
There is no question in my mind that that happened.
In specific, did she tell you and corroborate to you that he had asked her out on numerous occasions in a manner that made her very uncomfortable and felt that she was being harassed?
Yes, she did.
Ms. Wells?
She did not get into exact detail. She helped me to understand that she was the recipient of inappropriate and offensive behavior in the office.
Mr. Carr?
My recollection at the time is that I believed her without question. Since recalling that conversation and listening to and hearing much of the testimony here, I have rethought that view, and I have racked my brain trying to understand it. Having done that, I nonetheless come back to the same position that I believe her.
There's no question in my mind, Senator, that she told me she was sexually harassed by her supervisor at the EEOC, and I believed her then, and I believe her still.
Has she ever discussed with you being sexually harassed by anybody else? Any other supervisor?
No,
Any
Senator.
other evidence except this evidence with respect to Clarence Thomas, Ms. Hoerchner?
She has never done so. She has been very poised in dealing with men and has had little trouble at laughing off or brushing off unwelcome advances. But in a situation like this, where there was such a gross inequity in power, she was not able to do so to her satisfaction.
Well, did she ever discuss with you sexual harassment from anybody else?
No, never. Just concerning Judge Thomas.
Mr. Carr?
No, she didn't, but to be fair, we only discussed this for a brief period of time. It was, our contact was over a limited period of time.
No.
Judge Hoerchner, I'd like to ask you a question, in as much as you are a judge, and I'm interested in your opinion on, in contrast to Anita Hill, who we discussed today, and the pain and the suffering that she's endured. From your vantage point as a judge, do you have any comment to make on the pain and the suffering that's been endured by Judge Thomas's family here? Can you give us some insight, offer some words?
Yesterday, Judge Thomas spoke here very eloquently about the pain that he has experienced. There is only one person to blame for that pain. I know no one who takes any joy in his suffering. His suffering is very apparent. There is, however, only one person to blame. It is not the press. It is not the person or persons who leaked the information. It is not Anita Hill. He is suffering as a result of his own actions. And there's another person who has been suffering much, much longer. She's suffering now. She was suffering 10 years ago. And she is not suffering as a result of her actions. And that person is Anita Hill.
Anybody else wish to comment on that? One more question. This is 1991. That was 1981. Any comment on how you think sexual harassment might be approached in our society today under similar circumstances from what it was 10 years ago? Are we 10 years further ahead, or are we in the same place? How do you imagine a woman might handle a similar situation today, Judge?
Senator, even today, a woman who is 23, 24 years old, as Anita was, just out of law school, working in a situation of such tremendous inequity of power, I really could not realistically advise her that she would have adequate protection were she to make a complaint.
Well,
I think there is, to a certain extent, a greater sensitivity among men about this. Not overwhelming, but there is a greater one. And so I have seen some progress to that extent. But if there's anything that will help women deal with this, I think it's the fact that women seem to rely so much more on one another and have a better understanding that you can come together and talk about this, and the best thing to do is to talk about it and to try to work together to resolve it and to realize that you are not the guilty party, and the sooner that you throw off that idea, the sooner you can get some healing and some closure to it.
Mr. Carr, anything different today from 10 years ago? If she would have called you today versus 10 years ago, discussed her problem with you, what might you have recommended differently today from 10 years ago?
I'm not sure how I would have differed today from then. I may well, at this point, being 10 years older and having a better sense of how my own career has gone and how careers do go, on the one hand, been extremely cautious in advising her about the risks. On the other hand, upon reflection, I may have been more supportive of her to take the risks. I really don't know.
Senator, as you know, the Supreme Court did not establish a hostile work environment as a cause of action until 1987, I believe. So that in that sense, perhaps we've made some progress in our understanding of the law. But I must admit, as a person who does not teach in this area and is not familiar with the law in this area, that 4 years ago when Anita Hill came to me and told me this story and said that she felt she had no recourse at the EEOC, I did not understand why. I think now, when I see what has happened to Professor Hill as a result of these hearings, as a result of coming forward, I can better understand why victims of sexual harassment don't feel that they have any recourse.
Well, I too want to thank you for coming here today. I think you've given us dramatic evidence of what it's like in our society today to be female and not powerful and not wealthy and still make an attempt to try and get by in our society, what the difficulties are in many cases. And in that respect, you've been very enlightening to me. I would like to hope my colleagues and to many millions of Americans. So I thank you for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Simpson?
It really will be much less than 5 minutes. The very puzzling thing here for me are you're all lawyers. And you're all lawyers telling us that the system does not work for sexual harassment. What a curious and extraordinary thing. It's 1991, and these laws have been on the books for years. And Joe Biden, our chairman, has been involved deeply in these issues. So have many of us. I have not on the issue of the subcommittee. Sexual harassment is talked about all over America. And you're telling us as 4 lawyers that the system doesn't work. And this is very troubling to me. Obviously, we have a great deal to do. I thought it worked. I thought if you went forward, that things took place. A consultation takes place, supervisors, anonymous, and these things take place. And you're saying just, it's like saying the process doesn't work. I can understand why the chairman bridles. The process does work. But you're telling us it doesn't. And I don't understand that in this day, in this city, that sexual harassment claims aren't done in the way the statute was drawn, in a sensitive way to get them expressed, to protect both the victim and the harasser. Because there is a pattern. If there is a pattern, we're told that psychologically, of the victim and their response, and there is also a pattern of the harasser. It's seldom a singular thing. Now that is the way it is, and that's what we're dealing with. And my question is this. I understood Ellen Wells very effectively and passionately described sexual harassment. Did you say, and I'm asking if I didn't hear rattling going, that you had been, you said you had been touched. Did you bring a claim of sexual harassment? No, you said not. Okay, I'm sorry. Judge Hoerchner, have you ever brought a claim of sexual harassment?
There was an incident of sexual harassment where I now work. And The main victim of this complained through the internal system, and an investigation was done. I spoke to the investigator, and I wrote a statement which was not sent to the decision maker in that instance because the perpetrator and his attorneys had worked out a settlement, the terms of which are secret.
But you were involved in that some way.
I was involved in a very minor way.
Well, I'm not trying to be sinister. I was just thinking if you were involved in it where you were helping someone else with a sexual harassment charge, either as a counsel or friend, I'm wondering why you didn't help your closest friend, Anita Hill, when she was faced with the same information, and why you didn't give her that same counsel, and that is do something.
You're making an unwarranted assumption.
I'm not trying to, I'm just asking.
In this more recent situation, I did not counsel the person. And as I've said, I did try to help Anita. I tried to help her by listening and providing comfort. And apparently there was no comfort to be found.
Would you have done it differently now, knowing what you know, than what you did then?
If I were dealing with Anita at her present age, confidence, professional status, I would consider advising her to do something or say something. To be frank, I don't remember ever giving Anita advice about anything in my life.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions, and there's still some more if you're prepared, and then we'll go down to whomever else has any. Let me ask each of you to answer each of these questions, if you would. Did Professor Hill ever complain to you that any other employer she had, or anyone else other than the nominee, had harassed her or had made unwanted sexual advances toward her? Had asked her for a date, anything? Can anyone, let's just go down the list. Judge?
I'll just repeat essentially the same thing that I said the last time I was asked that question. No, she has never complained of that. She was very poised and very capable of brushing off and laughing off unwanted sexual advances. In this situation, in part, I'm sure because of the great disparity in power, she was not able to successfully do that.
Ms. Wells?
She has never described to me a situation similar to this, or any way remotely similar to this in terms of a work situation where a supervisor or a superior was making unwelcome advances.
Mr. Carr?
No, Senator.
Mr. Paul?
Yes, Senator.
Now, have any of you ever known under any circumstances, and you are under oath, has there been any circumstance in your relationship at any time with Professor Hill where you have known her to lie?
Absolutely not. Excuse me.
Never.
Never.
Absolutely not.
And it's an obvious question, but do any of you have any reason to believe, because there's been a lot of notions proffered here as to why Professor Hill, who is obviously made an impression of sincerity on the committee as well as many other people, there's been a lot of speculation as to, well, why, as has Judge Thomas come across as very forceful and sincere in his denials, do you have any reason to believe that any of the reasons that have been offered here, raised here, suggested here over the last several days as you've watched this, amount to anything other than she's simply just telling the truth and the facts as they occurred? Anyone?
Senator, if there were any desire on the part of Professor Hill for some sort of advancement in the profession of legal education, this whole proceeding was not the way to advance her career. She had tremendous opportunities. I feel confident that there were many law schools in this country that would have been happy to have offered Professor Hill a position prior to this proceeding. She chose to stay where she was because she wanted to be close to her family.
Do any of you, anyone else, have any reason, for example, does anybody have any reason to believe, and again you're under oath, that, as been suggested by some here, that there's a possibility that Professor Hill is fantasizing? Is there anything in her background or character, in any aspect of your relationship with her, would lead you to believe, and remember you are under oath, that she is possibly fantasizing about what happened?
She's one of the most truthful people that I know. She is not one subject to bouts of fantasy. At best, she might be a little sentimental, but to make up a story for what purpose? To bring this kind of public exposure to herself, it would not be in her character.
Senator, I certainly would echo that there's absolutely nothing in her character, as I recall, and that the things in her character that I do recall would not support the notion that she would fantasize.
What in her character do you recall that would not support the notion that she would not fantasize?
My recollection is that she is a very level-headed and factual person.
There's been suggested here the possibility that, and I know this has been raised, but I want it on the record, that she might be so ambitious that although Professor Paul, she would not be looking to advance her career this way, she might be looking to advance her financial situation by being able to turn this into a book or a movie. That's been suggested by some here. Is there any reason any of you would believe, anything in her character that would lead you to believe that's a possibility?
Senator, as I said earlier, I believe that the only book Professor Hill has any interest in writing would be a book on the Uniform Commercial Code. She is a private person, as has been testified already. I can't imagine her wanting to reopen this episode. She was so reluctant in her discussions with me, and moreover, once again, going back 4 years ago, in our discussion, there is no conceivable possible gain or advantage she could have imagined 4 years ago in a discussion with me in a university cafeteria about her coming to work at my university and telling me then that she left the EEOC because she was sexually harassed by her supervisor.
I'd like each of you to answer the question.
I can only imagine that the rationale for wanting to write a book would be fame or money. And I do not think those are significant motivations for Anita Hill. I don't believe she would have made the career choices she has made with the hope of somehow cashing in at some late date in her life. I think if she was motivated by money, she would have made different career choices.
Are you a partner in your law firm?
I am.
Without naming your law firm again, how large is your law firm?
It's about 430 lawyers, about 100 partners.
Would Anita Hill have any difficulty getting a job with your law firm?
Today she might. But I think that's a recollection, that's a reference of the Economic Times. But I have no doubt I don't think she would have any difficulty getting a job at a major law firm, either in New York or in some other city.
Ms. Wells, with regard to the question of writing a book, anything in her background, did she ever indicate to you that, boy, I saw such and such a story, they turned that into a mini-series or whatever? I mean, is there anything?
There's nothing. I wouldn't even be tempted to say that she was particularly romantic in outlook. By that I mean she's not even the type, as I know her, to want to sit down and talk about the latest bestseller and get into the characterizations there and talk about how this character appeals to you, and as though that individual were real. I don't even think she likes soap operas. So,
does she enjoy, like some men and women do, gossip?
We never gossiped. She and I never gossiped, so I can't speak to that. And I mean, we knew many of the same people, and we never sat around talking about them and gloating over juicy tidbits. That wasn't in her nature.
Judge, it's been suggested by some as well that she just may be a very malleable person, that it was clearly suggested yesterday, at least as one possibility, that she had an ideological bent that was inconsistent with the nominee. She felt strongly about that, and that she found herself placed in the hands of interest groups who used her like putty to accomplish this ideological end that she felt was important to accomplish and they felt was important to accomplish. Is she that malleable a person, or is there anything in her character, and again you're under oath, and your knowledge of her to indicate to you that she is someone that is that malleable or so inclined?
Well, as I testified just a moment ago, I have never given her advice, and the reason is that she is so independent and that I respect her judgment so much that I would not presume to advise her. I cannot imagine a force that could take her and use her as a malleable object.
I say to my colleagues, I know my time is up, I only have two more questions. It may be useful for me to finish them if that's all right, and then move on to anybody else who may have questions. I'd like to ask the question of Mr. Carr and Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul, Professor Paul at the university, did you find her one that was malleable, that shrunk from intellectual combat, that was easily able to have her opinions formed? I mean, is there any evidence of that?
I would not describe her as shrinking from an argument, no, Senator.
How would you describe her?
She is, in my impression, is that she's a very strong person. I think my impression of her is that she feels very deeply about her own being. She has a strong sense of roots, a strong sense of who she is and what she is, perhaps based on her religious upbringing, and she doesn't shrink from anything.
So notwithstanding the fact there may be a more senior professor who is sitting having a discussion on a legal point, she is not the kind who would yield her opinion to
That's correct, Senator. The
ad hominem argument.
She was in the summer that she was visiting at our school was the summer of the Judge Bork's nomination to the Supreme Court. As you recall, that was a very controversial nomination.
I had forgotten that. I'd like to forget that.
Members of my faculty were I would say mostly opposed to the nomination, and in defending Judge Bork as she did at that time, she could not have thought she was advancing her opportunities to return to our school. She did so eloquently, she did so with tremendous force and conviction.
Mr. Carr, on the same point, she's strong-willed, was she malleable, was she someone who yielded to intellectual or any other kind of pressure?
I would not call her malleable. I don't recall strenuous intellectual debate with her.
I guess that wasn't what you had in mind. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. I wasn't trying to be facetious. I mean, it was a relationship you had different than Mr. I should drop this. I should drop that part. You understand what I mean? I'm being very serious. I mean, was there anything in her character that would lead you to believe that groups or individuals could use her for their advantage to promote another cause? That's what I'm trying to get at, because that's been raised here. It's been flatly suggested that's what happened.
I don't believe that would be possible. My recollections of Anita are that she had sort of fundamental basic beliefs about what was right and what was wrong, and I would venture to guess that these kind of sexual accusations were clearly wrong, and that she was not expedient or willing to subvert or change her views inconsistent with the way they in fact were.
I have one last area to cover. Did any of you attend her going away party that was, we've heard, testified to here at the EEOC when she had decided she was going to leave? Did anyone attend that party?
I attended a going away party at the Sheraton Carlton.
Was that the going away party? Do you recall? What was the purpose of the going away party?
Well, she was saying goodbye to her friends here.
To go to where?
To Oral Roberts.
To go to Oral Roberts University. Were anyone else at that party among the four of you?
No, she did tell me about it later.
Right. Do any of you know a Mr. Doggett? John Doggett?
No.
No.
I went to business school with John Doggett, and I would consider him a friend.
Do you know, did John Doggett ever indicate to you that he went out with, wanted to go out, or thought Miss Hill wanted him to go out with her?
No, I don't.
Right, I have no further questions now.
Senator, I don't believe anybody left except Senator Grassley.
Senator Brown?
Senator Specter had none, okay. Senator Brown had none. The rest of them have none except Senator Grassley.
Well, maybe it's more a comment than a question. The lawyers on the committee refer to you folks as corroborating witnesses, and I guess, as I understand it, you're supposed to confirm what Professor Hills has alleged about Judge Thomas. There's no doubt in my mind that you folks are telling the truth, so I don't raise any fault with that you are telling us what Professor Hill told you. But it seems to me that in this role you do not confirm any sexual harassment by Judge Thomas of Professor Hill, and of course you couldn't give any details about what Professor Hill says happened to her because she didn't give you any of these details. That's how I've been able to, as I sat here and listened to you. She just didn't fill in any details. So what would be very helpful to us, would be the confirmation of these details that she expressed the other day. But, and I guess I also find it surprising that you didn't really offer any advice to her, but I guess Senator Simpson covered that point. It seems to me that someone as forthright and just referred to also as independent as Professor Hill wouldn't have given some details if they really happened. It just doesn't make sense that she simply told her friends or acquaintances that she was being harassed at work, and that's it. That's it. It just doesn't seem to fit. I guess I would have maybe one question. not following up on that, but just one question. Senator Specter asked, and I guess I would ask everybody but Mr. Carr this. He asked if you would vote for. You didn't want to express a view if you'd vote for. I want to know, do you want to see Judge Thomas on the Supreme Court? And I'd start with you, Judge Hoerchner.
Senator, I'm only here to tell the truth about what I was told back in the early 1980s. You've heard the truth today, and it's up to you to decide what to do with it.
Ellen Wells.
I echo what the judge says. I am here to give you this information that I know to be the truth. And for me to sit here and to say what my personal opinions may be about Judge Thomas's qualification for the Supreme Court, I think would not be appropriate. It would not answer to what I'm here for.
Professor Paul.
Senator, as a legal scholar and an attorney, I've been asked the question many times prior to these allegations whether or not Judge Thomas should be confirmed. I did not take a position then. I am not taking a position now. I am simply here to tell the truth about what I was told by Professor Hill 4 years ago, that she was sexually harassed by her supervisor at the EEOC.
Well, you said you didn't sign a letter. I'm kind of puzzled. If you have reason to believe that Judge Thomas is a sexual harasser or guilty of sexual harassment, why wouldn't you sign a letter against it?
Well, first of all, Senator, I was asked to sign the letter prior to these allegations. Second of all, Senator, I believe that Professor Hill told me the truth in 1987. But I believe that you, Senator, and the other members of this committee, sitting here trying to determine the facts, should wait to hear all the evidence before making a determination. As I said in response to Senator Simpson's question, if Judge Thomas, in fact, committed the acts alleged, then I don't think that he should be confirmed. If he did not commit the acts alleged, I have no position.
Well, I guess maybe I can't go any further and ask you further if you don't want to answer my question, but I can tell you at least why I asked. It seems to me, as I understand lawyers, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution in practicing your profession. Particularly you, Professor Paul, you're a student of the Constitution and of the Supreme Court decisions. It seems to me like people in your position ought to have a personal view of whether or not Judge Thomas ought to be on the Supreme Court, and that you'd welcome an opportunity to express it, and that you would think that for a non-lawyer like me, it'd be important for me to know it to determine whether or not you've got any bias.
Senator, I didn't have the opportunity during the original round of hearings to review the record. But if you'd like me to review the record, I'll be happy to come back and present you with my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. Senator Leahy.
Chairman, I would note on the question of whether Mr. Paul, because he's a lawyer and is taking an oath as a lawyer, should be telling us how to vote on this. There are only 100 people in this country who have taken an oath that requires them to vote on this confirmation. And 14 of them are here. We're the only ones who must state an opinion. I don't want to leave any kind of impression out there simply because somebody's a lawyer. They must have an opinion on whether Judge Thomas goes on the Supreme Court or not. There are only 100 people who have taken the oath of office that requires them to vote on it. And Judge Hoerchner, not going into everybody's testimony, you said you came here to tell the truth, and that we should use that truth. None of you said you saw the activity. The nature of the activity is such that nobody would have. But each of you have testified that years ago, Anita Hill came to you and told you of that. I just remind everybody who's watching these proceedings, corroboration is this: the woman who was sexually harassed is not going to go and tell you people that so that someday, 9 or 10 years later, you'd be in this room to tell about it. But you are, and we will use your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hatch.
Professor Paul, I deliberately stayed out of asking any questions, but I've been intrigued when Professor Hill chatted with you. Did she seem upset when she was chatting with you?
Yes.
Bitter?
No, I wouldn't describe her as bitter.
But upset?
Yes, Senator, she was embarrassed.
And she was not very happy with the person who did this to her, whoever it was.
I would hesitate to express an opinion on that, Senator.
Well, how would you appraise her demeanor?
I would appraise it by saying that she was embarrassed that I had raised the subject by asking her why she'd left the EEOC. Mm-hmm. And she responded to my direct question, I guess, honestly, and that's my assessment, and she was embarrassed that I had brought it up.
All right. This was in 1987?
Correct, Senator.
Okay. That's all.
No, we're not. We have two over here that wish to ask questions.
If I could have the attention of Senator Specter here. There was a discussion about how many phone calls were made, and he said Ms. Holt's deposition indicates that more than 11 calls were made. If he will look at the deposition on page 32, line 15, the question is asked, do you recall any other times that Anita Hill called where you did not note that on the telephone log? Answer, I don't. On page 44, line 20, you mentioned the vice chairman showed you 3, maybe more pages. Do you have a recollection of Miss Anita Hill calling Clarence Thomas any more times than may have been sporadically shown up on 3 such pages? Answer, I would not even guess about that. I don't know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm advised that Ms. Holt will appear as a witness and testify that there were other calls made by Professor Hill. And on the first citation where Senator Simon has read the record, which I am having pulled and will review, it was related to recordings, which I think referred to occasions when Judge Thomas was not present. But she's up in the next panel and we'll soon see.
If I may, I have one further question of Judge Hoerchner.
Excuse me, does the Senator yield?
I yield.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't know whether I apologize. The interruption, they're not interruptions. The reason I occasionally am turning around is because it's a constant administrative question as to who comes on next and how and timing. That's why minority and majority staffers, when I turn around, it's not for lack of interest in my colleagues' questioning. The Senator from Wyoming.
Judge Hoerchner, it is, I asked you if you had ever filed a charge of sexual harassment. I don't think you indicated to me that you had. I have a record from California in Norwalk County or Norfolk County, California, that you did file a claim against a fellow judge, a man named Judge Foster. Is that correct?
I was not sure how far in the proceedings that went. It was my understanding that he had negotiated a settlement. I was told that my statement was never taken up to the home office of our board.
But you did file a claim of sexual harassment against a fellow judge within your system.
I can't say that I didn't. I did not fill out any papers. It's possible that the result of my having spoken to the investigator was taken as filing a claim within our system. And in that case, that would be correct.
But he did eventually resign, and the process of his resignation and the activities around that were rather widely publicized within that county, weren't they?
The terms of the settlement were secret, were supposed to be secret. I am not aware of the full extent of them.
So again, I'm interested only in your intent to do those things, and you feel strongly about it, and I'm wondering why that counsel was not given to your friend.
Senator Khol, did you have...
Yes, just one quick question. Yesterday, Judge Thomas said that there was a plot afoot in this country to derail his nomination to the Supreme Court. As I hear your comments today, it's obvious to me that if there was a plot afoot, it must have originated 10 years ago. So, do you think that Anita Hill plotted for as long as 10 years ago to derail Judge Thomas's nomination to the Supreme Court?
I think that would have been impossible.
The same, Senator. That would have been impossible and unthinkable.
I don't believe that's possible.
No, Senator. She would be not only deserving of an Academy Award, but she'd be a prophet.
Well, he yesterday did, as you know, if you followed his testimony, he made a very, very big point of stating that what was happening here was that there was a huge plot among Anita Hill and others to see to it that he never achieved his nomination. And are you saying that you regard that sort of an analysis on his part to be almost out of the question?
Senator, I'd like to point out that the members of this panel met when they walked into this room. So in order for us to have been part of a conspiracy or a plot, we needed to have met one another at some point to get our facts straight and whatever. And we did not have that opportunity.
That's correct,
That is
Senator.
correct.
That's correct, Senator. We don't know each other.
You've never met before you met here today?
I've never met any of these people before.